Pilgrimage is the latest full-length album from Sylvan Awe. It's their third full-length album, and they're Melbourne, Australia-based atmospheric black metal band. And I would say they've tipped the scales away from something so resolutely atmospheric and now something more song-oriented, and definitely starting out in a place that was probably back in 2015 or so, that was probably more in line with Wolves in the Throne Room and the influences that they'd sort of showered down upon others beyond that point, as well as some obvious influence in Agalloch, Hate Forest, and other bands of a certain era, I would say, in terms of where black metal was about 10 years ago versus now. So their first record was very formative in that regard. And they'd worked on other projects in the meantime. I think it took them quite a few, about 6 years before Transcend hit, and that was a different sort of record. It was getting many more comparisons to Mgła instead of Hate Forest and that kind of thing. And I think that was just maybe a side effect of a certain type of melodic focus or the diction of the vocals. It wasn't the best comparison. I think if you're a fan of Mgła, you know that a lot of things get compared to them that are really nothing like their development album to album. And returning to their records today clarifies that pretty quickly. And I think there's more varietal influences going into Sylvan Awe's sound. And I think that's easier to prove now that we can touch upon this third album, which is much more generally melodic, musical in its development, and a little bit more tightened up in its overall performances in terms of showing a bit of skill and forming these dramatic and inspired songs. So let's cut into one of them right now and get a sense for the feel and the sound of the album. So the first thing to note when you cut into this album and you go through this pair of fairly long and involved pieces is that there are hooks, there are melodic moments, there are certain things driving this record into place. But this is really the first mode of a journey that passes through from side A to side B with quite a bit of variety, and I would say something that's probably more influenced by Enslaved and that kind of thing, rather than it is the more maybe more modern bands that I've mentioned otherwise. And I say that because there's a sort of progressive touch to some of the way that they piece things together, but also that they pay attention to the way that the rhythm section develops quite a bit. And I think that side of the band becomes more accomplished and more capable with each release. And this one comes fairly quickly off of the last one, and yet it doesn't necessarily feel like a response to it. It feels like it's the next chapter. It's something different with something else to say. And I think that adding a bit of synth here and there, adding a unique bass sound there, and a pretty rousing 8-minute melodic piece here and there. There's a lot to this record that shows not only global interest in different atmospheric forms of black metal, but also the types of melodies that they develop. And all of this feeds into this. It's not really a grab bag of a record, but one that goes places. It works through a lot of different things throughout, and we find that it successfully creates this kind of cohesive melodic event overall, but generally covers a lot of ground that feels like they're mature beyond their years already. And that's a funny thing to say about a band that's been around for a while, but it feels like they've sort of keyed or tapped into where they're most effective. And sometimes that means there's a little bit of a heavy rock movement to some things. There's a bit of heavy metal in there overall. And I think that's kind of where a lot of this type of black metal works best, is when it's centered around the song and the meaning behind it. So overall, I don't think I have that much more to say about it. It's just a very finely produced record. It's got a great sound to it. I think that by focusing on the rhythm section and its purpose, they've sort of elevated everything else. And some of the more complex and long-form arrangements on here feel like they're always active. They always have a purpose and movement, and that made it easier to become immersed and appreciate the songwriting of the album. I don't think that this is such a specialized event that you have to be deep within the niche to appreciate it. I think this is a fairly approachable record, and because of that, I'm giving it a fairly high review or recommendation. So go ahead and check the score out, check the album out. It's been out for about a week now, and go read my review for more thoughts.